noisy. This is from, Plant Powered Families. And I'm sharing this recipe today because I think it's one that will carry you so nicely through spring and summer. Not that it's only for spring and summer, but when we're eating lighter meals and we don't want to cook too much, this is a recipe that's really lovely. And I think just about most people will enjoy it. The flavors are really great. It's easy to make. There are no nuts. There's no gluten, so it kind of helps for all those food sensitivities and working around those dietary issues. And of course, this dish is fully plant-based and it's also oil-free. So the recipe is called Southwest Quinoa Salad. I'm going to try to get this photo opened up for you here. And that's the image. And Jennifer will have the recipe for you fully. I'm going to show you how to make it here now. Okay, so I'm going to lower this so you can see what's going on here in the kitchen. And the recipe starts with cooked quinoa. So this is the only thing that you actually have to cook. And what I do with grains and other ingredients that I use quite frequently in the kitchen is to batch cook them. So I cooked a big batch of quinoa the other day, and I have a couple of containers like this in the fridge so that they're ready to use at any time. So we need 2 cups of quinoa in this salad. And I prefer the white quinoa. There's a few varieties of quinoa, and I find that white quinoa cooks up nicely and the flavor is good. So it's up to you, but I also like in this recipe the mix of colors using the white quinoa versus like a red quinoa. So there we are. And that's 1 cup and 2 cups, and it's a pretty rough measure. You don't have to be exact. Like if it's a little bit full, that's okay. And pop that in. Next, we're adding some lime juice. So this is a Southwest quinoa salad, and the addition of lime juice really brings up the flavor so nicely. I love using citrus in a lot of my recipes, and lemon juice, lime juice, they really add great flavor, bump up the whole profile of flavor in a recipe. So we have like 2.5 to 3 tablespoons. If you know you love citrus and you also know you like things a little tangy, then use the full 3 tablespoons, or you can always add more later after you've mixed it up. Now the next ingredient I'm not including right now because, and I'll tell you in a moment, it's just a tiny bit of sweetener. You really don't need it. I'm not adding it here today because I'm also adding some salsa, and the salsa that I'm using is a sweeter salsa because it's a mango salsa. It's really mild, and you can use a hot salsa here, mild. You can use any variety that you like. You can make it yourself, you can purchase it, like easy peasy, your decision. So we begin to mix this together, and then I'm gonna add, so that bit of quinoa there is a little bit chunky. We're gonna mix that up. And then we're adding, and you can always add more salsa than this as well. You love the salsa in there. The salsa will add some sodium as well, so we're not adding too much salt to this recipe, but we will add a little bit. So next I'm adding some black beans, and these are from canned. I don't always cook beans from scratch because I have a lot of things I'm cooking, right? And we need to give ourselves some breaks along the way. So these black beans have been, they're just canned black beans. You can look for BPA-free cans. There are a few brands that also cook the beans with kombu and makes them kombu seaweed. It makes them a little more digestible. So just always rinse the beans beforehand, and drain well. Now a can of black beans is about 1.5 cups. So if you want to add all the beans, go for it. If you cook from dry, then you can just use 1 cup. So it's a really flexible recipe. And now we're adding, let's see what else we got here. I've got some red pepper, bell pepper. And if you have yellow bell pepper, of course you can use that. There's not a lot in this recipe, and really I'm using it for a little bit of color more than anything because it adds a beautiful bright red color. You could substitute tomato. You could use green pepper if you want. And how finely you chop it is up to you. I like a fairly fine dice. There we go. I'm just running through this again because I can see that the skin on this pepper is a little bit stubborn, so it didn't quite chop as well as I thought it might the first go around. There. So it's a 1/4 cup, but you'll have all the recipe measurements, ingredient measurements. And next we're adding some corn. I use frozen corn, and you can add it frozen and then just let it thaw in the salad, super easy. If you want to eat it right away, you can just pour some boiling water over the corn, let it sit for a moment, and then drain it off in a strainer. I realized when I started this recipe, I only had a little bit of corn, so instead, I opted to dice some cucumber with it. And again, that's what you can do, right? And even if you don't like corn, or if it's not an ingredient you want to eat, or you have some sensitivity to it, you can substitute out. And some green onion. Now, green onion can be substituted with chives. I like to just remove the ends a tiny bit. And with the green onion, I like to use just the green portion because it's milder in flavor. It's not as strong as when you get down to the base of the stalks. How much do I have in here? I think it's about a 1/2 cup. Have a quick look. Oh, yeah, there we go. It's about a 1/4 cup. But again, you can use more if you like. So I think I have about a 1/4 cup chopped already. And we have some spices. We have a teaspoon or a 1/2 teaspoon to a teaspoon of ground cumin and a little bit, just a little bit of allspice. Now, I know that sounds kind of weird, but a tiny bit of cinnamon or a little bit of allspice in these Southwest flavored dishes is really, really good, along with the cumin. And the ingredient that so many people either love or hate, some fresh cilantro. If you're one that really doesn't like cilantro, leave it out. It's totally okay. The recipe will taste great without it. But if you love it, use it. You could substitute a little bit of parsley for the cilantro, but it doesn't have, quite the same like pop of flavor, especially for the other ingredients and flavors in this recipe. But you know what? Again, it's up to you. So we're just using a little. I think I've got like a 1/4 cup in the recipe. Yeah, a 1/4 cup. And I like to chop it fairly fine. So it's interesting because I find that cilantro is one of those things in my family that the kids like it when it's in the right kind of flavor combination. So if they were to have a lot of cilantro in a dish and it didn't really have other components that work well with it, they really would notice it. And I think that's what's kind of key with this herb, is to use it in ways that the flavor really combines well. Mind you, some people really, really don't like the flavor in any combination, right? So that's okay. And now the other thing that we're using in this recipe, and you can either omit it or reduce it, but it's so, so good, is a little chopped avocado. So this adds a real luscious quality to the salad. And if you chop it fairly fine, small cubes, not too small, but little cubes. Let's just show you about how big we've chopped those. There we are. Then it's going to distribute nicely in the salad, and you'll get nice bits throughout the salad, and you can use a little less. So if you want to chop it a bit finer, you can use less in the recipe to distribute through. I think I have about a 1/2 to 3/4 cup in my recipe, but if you're following a regimen where you need to reduce fat for some particular reason, then you can certainly reduce this or omit it. And if you were to omit it, I'd probably, add a little bit more salsa, just something else to bump up the flavor and the interest in the salad, maybe a little more cumin. But even like I say, if you were to take a 1/4 cup, it's going to add a lot to this recipe, and then per serving, it's really not too much at all. Okay, and I just think the only thing I've missed is a tiny bit of salt, just like quarter to half teaspoon. You can adjust to taste. So the amount of salt that you use in the recipe does depend on the salsa that you use, because salsa brands have a different level of sodium. So add the like quarter teaspoon and then adjust to taste after. Mix it through, taste it, and then if you want a little bit more salt, then go for it. And I think we have everything. I'm just gonna look through real quick. The other thing that would be really lovely to add is if you have organic limes, and I do have some. I don't call for it specifically in the recipe because a lot of times we don't have organic limes, but if you do a little bit of lime zest, wow, it's really going to pop the flavor. So touch, and I use a kitchen rasp. This is a kitchen rasp, and you just want to go around the lime, just get the very outer part of the lime where it's green, not the pith where it's white. So you rotate the lime as you go, and it comes through the rasp. And you can just tap it, and already I'm smelling the oils from the lime zest. It's just beautiful. It's a beautiful aroma. And there we are. That is our Southwest quinoa salad. And this will keep in the fridge for about, I'd say, well, it's so delicious. It's probably not going to keep long, but you could probably make it in advance without the avocado. Make it in advance, and you could keep it for about 4 days, after even 3 to 4 days. After that, the vegetables start to break down. I would add the avocado last minute rather than letting it sit if you want to keep it too long, like for extra time, just because the avocado will oxidize a little bit when it's in the salad. But you know, it's not a huge deal. If you know you want to make this in advance and it's in the fridge for a couple of days, it's going to be okay. It's just if you're serving it for people and you want that avocado to be really bright and fresh, then make everything else, then add the avocado just before mixing it through to serve. There you go. Isn't that pretty? Lots of color, lots of flavor, keeps in the fridge well, really easy to make. Just have your quinoa batch cooked so it's cooled in advance, and you've got a salad that will be in regular rotation. In addition to eating it straight up like this, you could serve it on a bed of greens, and you could also put it inside a wrap. You know, like make a Buddha bowl with it and add other components, add some extra salsa, lots of things you can do. Oh, put it on top of baked sweet potatoes or potatoes. That would be delicious too. Right? And it comes from my cookbook, Plant Powered Families, and you can find more of my recipes on dreenaburton.com. Thank you, enjoy, and maybe we'll be back soon with another recipe. Okay, bye.